Thank you, Jay. Appreciate that. If you could raise your hand, we'll bring a mic your way for questions. You covered it all, Jay. Back in the back.
Hi, Jay, right here. Hey, good to see you.
Good to see you.
You said we hope to be a source of inspiration when we arrive in Maui this January. Are you committed that the century will happen in Kapalua?
Absolutely. But I think at this point there's so many unknowns. And we want to be respectful of the challenges. We want to help be a part of the revitalization. There are a lot of considerations. We're committed, if we're allowed to, if we're invited, if we're embraced, given all that needs to be accomplished, we will be there 100%. But I think at this point right now, that's outside of our hands. Our focus is on, what can we do with and through Max, with and through great people like Mark Rolfing, with and through the governor, to continue to lean into what our players, from Colin to Xander, I think John captured it very well last week. The PGA Tour, when moments like this happen, this is when we're at our best. And so we don't have the answer to that right now, but we want to do everything we can to make certain that that's a moment for the people of Maui that is entirely helpful and inspiring. And I'd also add that our partner in Century has been there every step of the way and is, doing some pretty remarkable things right now alongside our team, and we'll have more to add on that front. But we are hopeful to be there.
Steve? Right here.
I'll ask the provincial Atlanta question. Given all the foundational changes coming here with the tour, what can you say about the future of this event at this place in the long term, 5 years down the road and beyond?
This tournament is extremely well positioned. I mean, I just see the FedEx Cup playoffs and the Tour Championship at East Lake only growing in significance as we go forward. The FedEx Cup is foundational to the PGA Tour, and making it to East Lake is foundational to our players. So we continue to invest in and around the event itself. We continue to be received by this community exceedingly well. Our ticket sales are up 20% year over year. The team continues to grow this tournament. So at this point, I think we're, as you look to 3 to 5 years, as you said, this tournament is very well positioned. And I think with the work that's going to be done to the golf course starting next week, I think that should give you every indication, alongside the fact that the partners I mentioned earlier are long-term committed to the Tour Championship at East Lake. I expect to be sitting up here in front of you for many years to come this week.
Jay, a couple in the framework agreement, if I may. Firstly, what would you say to those of maybe cynical disposition who would suggest that this was purely a mechanism to stop the litigation which you described, and that nothing else beyond that actually needs to happen? Now you've put that away. What would you say to that theory?
I would say that we operate in good faith, and I see that on both sides. And that framework agreement, which is an agreement to reach an agreement, put us in a position to reach an agreement, those safeguards that are in place and our commitment to moving from, the divisive nature of the relationship we had to a productive one, for us to be able to make a fundamental transition to our business with the formation of NewCo, to have an investable entity for PIF to be able to invest in that didn't previously exist, for the PGA Tour to, be in control of the future of men's professional golf, and for us to be partners. If we were going to end the litigation, we would have just announced that we were ending the litigation. And our teams, if you saw the amount of conversation and the time that the PGA Tour, DP World Tour, and PIF are spending working forward from a framework to a definitive, I think you'd see that the sincerity of the efforts there.
And specifically on Live Golf, in your mind, does that exist in 2, 3, 5 years' time? Because that would seem contrary to the development plans you're speaking about for your own tour.
I think, there are a lot of questions that are specific questions that are going to come and have come to me as it relates, and have come to others as it relates to elements of what is in the framework agreement and elements of what we're talking about. I'm not going to talk publicly about them until we've completed those discussions, and I can answer that question specifically and directly.
Eamon?
Jay, you mentioned players reaching out to you, wanting to take more of a governance role in the tour. Did you interpret that as an indictment of how the tour has been run over the last few years?
I did not. I think there is one thing I'll add, Eamon, is that it's not like all of a sudden there was a point in time and a lot of players, reached out to say they wanted to be more involved. If you go back to last summer, if you go to Hartford and the announcements that we made when we were going to be launching a series of designated events, to the announcements that we made here, and ultimately to the announcement of June 6th and the aftermath of it, we're out every day. Tyler, our player relations team, talking to our players, getting their perspective and trying to be as communicative as we can about where we are. And I look at this as not an indictment, but a very positive message. And, for us to be in a place where our players want to be more involved. Candidly, we've hired an advisor for our player directors. This is a very complex situation, and if you're a player director or you're a member of the PAC, this is more complex than any other period of time. And I feel like we've listened, we've responded, and now we have the right people, the right process in place for us to be able to move forward and determine that future. But I look at it as a positive and something that I and we embrace and quickly embrace.
It's a living, breathing thing, week in, week out, being out here, seeing over many years and all the different, things we've had to tackle with the schedule or other changes to tournament regulations. The last couple of years have been very positive because there are more and more players actively engaged every day in thinking about the PGA Tour. It's an association of professional golfers and how to make it better. So, like Jay said, I feel that every day in player dining and on the range and when we see players. I think that's probably one of the most positive outcomes of the last couple of years.
We'll have Doug and then Zach, please.
Jay, as you talk about, as you talk about the confidential nature of the discussions going forward on the agreement, it's one thing not to have answers or thoughts or speculation for a public question, but how do you deal with players who also want to know stuff, are frustrated and feel like they were left in the dark in the first place, and go to meetings and come out of it and say we didn't learn anything new? Surely I would think they're getting frustrated by that.
I think the way that we're dealing with that is that we're following our governance. And we have 6 player directors that are on our board. As I just mentioned, we have an advisor in Colin Neville who's advising them. We have an investment bank in Allen and Company. We've had the opportunity to, as Tyler just mentioned, really going back to June 6th, to have individual conversations, to have a 2.5-hour player meeting at the Travelers Championship, to have a player meeting in Memphis, to having so many one-on-one conversations where we're talking about the process that we have, the transparency that we're going to be providing, as would always be the case with our player directors, and letting them know that this is standard. Like anytime you talk to a leader of any other organization, once you get to this position, it's pretty standard that there isn't a lot that you're going to be able to share, but we continue to reinforce the fact that the framework agreement is ultimately the path that we're on, and when we're able to share more information, we will. But it's also, I think they also understand that with the governance we have in place, we're not going to be able to, it's our job to put forward the best possible construct with PIF for the future. And we're going to take that back to our board, and ultimately they're going to decide whether, we're going to move forward with it. I think players have a comfort level that ultimately that's, that process is one, that's a process that they're getting more comfortable with now that they understand it.
A quick follow from your perch. How would you gauge the mood of the players from June 6th to now, and if it's changed, what and why has it changed?
I think you'd have to ask the players that, but for me specifically, first of all, the players are focused on the FedEx Cup playoffs and the Tour Championship, and I have, from my conversations and from the great work that our team has done, I think if I were to succinctly put it, and this is the way Jack Nicklaus put it to me, the proof is in the pudding. And so I think players are now saying, okay, I understand what we're trying to accomplish and why we've taken this step. I understand that, the confidential nature of what we're dealing with and how you plan to handle that within the governance. And at this point, I think players are focused on their play, and they know, as we move forward, and certainly as we move towards the end of the year, there's a responsibility and expectation from them towards me and the team that, we're going to be in a position to communicate a positive outcome for the PGA Tour.
Zach?
Hey, Jay, Zach Klein from Channel 2 here in Atlanta. Good morning. I'm just curious to get your take on what happened with Max and Chris over the weekend. Obviously, your sport, there's not a constant cheer like in other professional sports, and the advent of technologies and live gambling, the unruly fan can cause an immediate reaction and disadvantage. What's your concern level on that, and are there any steps you guys can do to kind of curb this going down the road?
Well, thanks. First off, we take fan conduct and safety of players, caddies, and everybody on site with the utmost seriousness, and those fans were ejected immediately. To zoom out on a wider context to that, we've long faced the balance of what is most special in golf is that every fan can have a front row seat. It's unique among sports, and the environment we put out at a PGA Tour event we believe is best in class. So you balance that with the fun, and that's long been an issue out here really since the beginning of the PGA Tour. We have a robust and comprehensive fan code of conduct. We have an extensive security apparatus and plan each week, and we feel really confident about all the aspects of that. We spend a good deal of time monitoring it each and every day, and we take it very seriously.
I'm just going to add, I think Max put it perfectly. Our fans are tremendous, and the fact that this happened is unfortunate. As Tyler said, it was dealt with, but our fans have great appreciation for the integrity of the competition. They're respectful of our players, and we have seen that continue to be the case, and expect that to continue to be the case. We have tremendous fans that have tremendous respect for what these players need to do in order to provide and present the tremendous performances they do.
Bob?
Hey, Jay, just two things separate. One, I wanted to follow up on Hawaii real quick.
Okay.
Is there a need to have a backup plan, like looking for another golf course, perhaps on a different island, just in case, or are you not to that point yet?
All of our efforts are on, and all of our attention is to try and get back to Kapalua, and to try and be as close to what we've been in the past. To your point, if it looks like that's not a possibility, then we'll go to Plan B. I want to be clear, there's no indication that we won't be back there. We're just trying to be respectful.
And as far as the negotiations on the framework agreement, can you quantify where they're at? Is it just at the beginning? Are you far along? Any recent talks?
Yeah, quantifying is always an interesting thing when you're talking about a negotiation. There are frequent talks. Tyler and Ron Price, who did a tremendous job in my absence, are leading conversations with the team from PIF. And I would just say, given the fact that there's frequency of talks, including Keith Pelley from DP World Tour, we're probably right where I would expected that we would be. But there's, so there's an intensity and there's an urgency and there's a lot of good work that's being done.
And just Bob, just to kind of add to what I said in Memphis, Ron and I have been actively engaged weekly, multiple times a week, and aside from the aspects of the framework agreement that we've talked about, there's just a lot of work streams that go into a deal like this between the PGA Tour, the PIF, and the DP World Tour. So it progresses daily, and it's very positive and collaborative in nature.
Do you have any reason to believe you wouldn't get it done by January 1?
We're confident that we're going to reach a positive outcome for the PGA Tour. And as it relates to reason not to believe or believe, at this point, given what Tyler just outlined and what I said, I don't have any reason to think that we won't be successful.
Eamon? I'm sorry, I didn't see you with the mic. Please, go ahead.
Hey, Jay. David Ramsey with Front Office Sports. I think there's a lot of anticipation that 25 might be the big year with a lot of changes with players coming back. Is there any scenario you can envision where banned players could come back to the tour in 2024 if they wanted to and if they took the necessary steps to come back?
I appreciate your question, and as I just said earlier, these are the kind of topics and discussions that we're having right now with PIF. So to be able to project what's going to happen, I don't have an answer today, and when we complete our discussions, we'll have an answer for that question. So that's a non-answer, but that's my position.
Evan, go ahead.
Jay, over here. Good to see you back.
Good to see you.
Yeah. What is a positive outcome for the PGA Tour?
What is a positive outcome? Mm-hmm. It's what I said earlier. It's if you just go back to the nature of the agreement that we struck, the framework agreement, it is the PGA Tour partnering with PIF, having PIF be a minority investor in NewCo, with the PGA Tour with full board governance and operational control of the tour and ultimately the men's professional game moving forward. And for fans, for us to be able to use the capital to be able to, invest back in our product, to do things like, further reduce commercial inventory in our broadcast, to further invest in our data businesses, to further invest in our media business, to potentially invest in entities and companies that we think are going to help us grow and diversify our fan base and the game. We're not an organization that has the capital to invest, and so to be able to be in that position and do that productively and constructively for the tour and our players, but also for the game, I think, the decision that or the thing that I'm thinking about is, you get the question about 25, but it's also, where are you going to be in 10 or 15 years? And the sport of golf and the PGA Tour are in a really strong position thanks to our players. I mean, the work that was done coming out of COVID, what's happened, everything I've outlined here before. And, we wake up every day saying, how can we get stronger relative to other sports? How can we get more young people around the world into our game? We have a responsibility to do that, in addition to making this the strongest tour it can possibly be, and I think it allows us to do both. And so that to me is a successful outcome.
Eamon?
Jay, with all due respect to your privacy, are you able to provide an update on your health? And also, do you intend to follow up as Ron Price and Jimmy Dunn did and testify before the Senate?
I appreciate the question about my health, Eamon. I would put it this way. I have never felt better mentally and physically than I feel right now. And obviously I had to take some steps to go from where I was to this position. But I'm a work in progress. And so I'm working on the things that I've learned that are going to help me in my life and help me in this role. And that's something, like it is out here for our players, that's something I have to work on every single day. That's how I feel, but more importantly, my doctors, my wife and girls, ultimately, that's how they feel about how I'm doing, and they are my arbiters. But I really do. I feel as strong as I felt in a long, long time, and I feel inspired and ready to go from the position we're in ultimately to generate a really positive outcome for the PGA Tour, and I came back ready to do that alongside my peers and our players, but I'm thankful that I had the opportunity to step away and really assess where I was and put myself on the path that's going to allow me to do that. And your second question was, bear with me here.
Testimony.
Yeah, first of all, I think Ron and Jimmy they answered the call quickly. They went up there. They answered all the questions that were asked of them. We've provided all the information that's been requested of us. While I was on leave, I was asked if I would testify, and I immediately said yes. My dates didn't work, which is why Jimmy and Ron testified. So I feel like they've answered all the questions, but to your point, the PGA Tour will continue to comply with the requests that come our way, and if there's a request of me to be there, then I will be there.
Steve?
Yeah, Jay, what you know of the changes coming to the course here, what do you think? And had the tour at all suggested that they needed to alter the course a little bit here?
Yeah, so we are very excited about the changes, and just to talk about them briefly, it's really a renovation off of the original Donald Ross layout and style going back to 1949. There's aerial photography that the club has acquired. They're working with Andrew Green. And we're excited about it because you're going to see the classic features of the course restored, bunker location, style, some of the green angles and so forth changed, and little, aesthetic details. There's some shifting of holes in some places. And so, in that regard, it's just going to continue to be a classic venue that we can contest our season-ending championship on. A side benefit of all that is, new infrastructure, ability to drive the best agronomic conditions here in Atlanta for our season-ending event. So we're really excited about it, and the club's got a lot of work ahead here the next year, and our team's very integrated in that across our rules officials and other experts and so forth. So it should be a great year to come here.
Well, had the tour expressed this, there was a need to do this?
Yeah, you know, the no is the short answer in the short term, but, you know, every PGA Tour venue has to continue to invest in itself, and it's a natural evolution. Part of it is the growing infrastructure of tournaments, you know, outside the ropes, but inside the ropes, agronomy, the changing way that we take care of the turf grass and so forth. So that's a natural cadence that occurs at all of our venues. Colonial Country Club for the Charles Schwab Invitational is under a full renovation right now. So we're used to that, and it's something that is generally planned out years and years in advance. It's been a conversation we've been having here at Eastlake for many years.
Dylan?
Jay, back here. How would you characterize this season for you personally, and how you've handled, I guess, what are probably unprecedented circumstances?
I'll leave that up to you. To me, when I assess my own performance, I usually don't do it in points in time. And ultimately, I think we're sitting here in August, and yes, we're competing for the FedEx Cup. And I'm determined to put the PGA Tour in the best possible place by the time we get to the end of the year. And as I said earlier, I see it. And I'm certain that's where we're going to end up. And I fully acknowledge that this hasn't been an easy road. And I fully acknowledge for that matter, that there are some things that are the basis for your question. But ultimately, I really do feel very strongly about the result we're going to have. And more importantly, you look at, this year, so we were sitting here a year ago, and if you had told me that we'd be in a position where these incredible stories would have developed, these remarkable performances, and there's so many of them I can't even, I don't want to start naming them because then I'm not going to be naming another player that had a remarkable year. But what's most important through this all is that the PGA Tour has gotten stronger. I mentioned all the data earlier, and the fabric of competition, the meritocracy of the PGA Tour, that feeling that our fans have when they're watching our tournaments come to conclusion, in addition to our players and the support we have. It's not me. The model itself continues to progress and grow. And that's the broader team effort, and that's what I'm focusing on and making certain that we continue.
And just to take a bit of a left turn then.
Okay.
The DP World Tour's new schedule was just released, and there are some significant changes.
Yes.
I'm curious how you think those fit in with the PGA Tour schedule.
Yeah, I'll start and add in, Jay. But the way to think about the DP World Tour is where we always start with the players. And there's long been a very strong and steady group of players who want to play on the PGA Tour, but they're from Europe. Maybe they grew up, started their careers out there, and they love it. And so we have worked really closely with the DP World Tour for many years, but certainly since we forged our strategic alliance, to just think about players and what's best for them. I think everyone's aware that next season, for the first time, we've formalized that pathway of 10 cards for the top 10 DP World Tour players onto the PGA Tour. We're really excited about that. That's long been an informal pathway. And so, the next piece was the schedule, the bringing the Genesis Scottish Open onto the PGA Tour calendar as a co-sanctioned event was, the most obvious thing. That's been a great couple of years in a row we've had there, where for many years PGA Tour members have played there the week before the Open. And so their latest schedule announcement is something that we've been collaborating together on and thinking about how to best allow movement between the two tours. We're excited about it. As you know, many of the top players, certainly those who have made it to the BMW Championship and then here to the Tour Championship, they have the ability to now craft their own schedule in the fall. There's great FedEx Cup fall events that they love to play in, and they will continue to support those. But we've now created the ability to go to some of these premier DP World Tour places like the BMW PGA Championship at Wentworth and so forth. So we think it's going to be great. We're really excited about it. I was proud to see the announcement of the DP World Tour schedule.
And I'll just add that based on the nature of our partnership with the DP World Tour and the fact that I serve on the DP World Tour board, the amount of dialogue and conversation and candidly our commitment to the DP World Tour, I think, is reflected in that schedule. And we got a lot of people at the PGA Tour that are working alongside Keith and his team, and I'm in contact with Keith as much as I am with anybody else in the golf world, and proud of what's been accomplished there.
Time for just a couple more. Doug?
Tyler, I don't know if you have a particular work stream on the FedEx Cup, but have you done any projections on the 50 who made it to Memphis, getting in all the signature events? What kind of a advantage they would have over the rest of the field as it relates to being guaranteed more spots with more FedEx Cup points, et cetera?
Yeah, we have, Doug, and that's something that actually was a key focal point going back to the beginning of this year when we were looking about what ultimately now has been revealed as the schedule. You had the 8 signature events. They occur as part of a wider cadence of big events with the Players' Championship, the majors. There's 31 weeks leading into the 3 playoffs. And we spent a lot of energy with our data analytics team building a predictive model to look at what could happen and what would happen. And to Jay's point about meritocracy earlier, there were 2 things that were really important to us. And one was that we kept focus on the balance between those that retain their card, the retention rate of the top 50 and the top 125 versus the new players. And then also related to that was how many new players got their cards. So those, we built I shouldn't say I built, our team built a comprehensive model that looked at that. And, we see that in the future, based on that model, the retention rate of the top 50 is very, very similar to what it's always been. I think on average it's about 64%. So in other words, 38% of the players each year would be new in the top 50 from year to year. And there were on average in all those models over 70 additional players that ended up playing in the signature events beyond the top 50. So we think we found a great model between all of those pieces of the puzzle, including the FedEx Cup point system, to keep that meritocracy and that pipeline of new players strong out here on tour.
So your projections show that of the 50 who were at BMW last week, even though they're in all the signatures, only about 30 will be back next year.
Yeah, about 64% on average retain their card, and that's very similar if you look historically to changes every year, of course.
Okay, we'll wrap it up with Eamon and Rex, please.
Jay, you mentioned earlier that the board is going to decide whether or not the Saudi investment is a positive for the tour. Do you have an alternative investment if the board says it's not the outcome they want?
Well, right now, Eamon, my focus is on the negotiations with PIF, and that's where all my energy and attention is. But I think, given the amount of attention that our framework agreement has received, and in particular the fact that we've created a new PGA Tour Enterprises, I think the realization that there is an entity that can be invested into at the PGA Tour, and the uniqueness of being able to invest into a professional sports league of the caliber, quality, and sustainability of the PGA Tour obviously has generated a lot of interest. But in terms of alternatives, right now, the sole conversation that we're having is the conversation we're having, with PIF.
Last one, Rex.
Tyler, this is probably for you. Is there any update on the model local rule since the comment period ended? And can you envision a time when they would play one golf ball at PGA Tour events and another golf ball at some of the majors?
Yeah, we haven't had any update following the conclusion of the period. There's a lot of constituents that the USGA and the R&A are hearing from during that 6-month period. You're aware of, our position, what we've heard from our players and all of our constituents, and our plan is to continue to collaborate around a single rule that can make sense. It's what we've done really since 2003. When we made a statement alongside the R&A and the USGA about this, and there's been 8 rule changes that we've supported through that process. So we're talking to the USGA and the R&A regularly, and I know they're evaluating that, so there'll be more news in the coming months for sure on that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Tyler, for your time. I've been asked to remind you that John Rahm will be in the Media Center, regularly scheduled location at 10:30 for his pre-tournament press conference. Thanks you all. Everyone. Let's have a great week.
Thank you.